She called the police on a black veteran, but froze when an officer entered. The bell above the door rang sharply as Harold pushed it open and stepped inside. The aroma of fried bacon and fresh coffee was in the air. This place was a classic diner. Checkered floors, worn booths, a counter lined with faded bar stools. It has probably existed for decades. From those establishments where the regulars had their names inscribed in the rhythm of the morning bustle. Harold adjusted his army cap. The golden embroidered eagle glittered slightly under the fluorescent light. His knees ached after the long drive from the Veterans Hospital, but he was already used to this pain. At the age of 76, he carried a story that most people could not understand just by looking at him. He noticed an empty table by the window and headed there, carefully placing his cane at the edge of the booth. Outside, the sun hung low, clinging to the edges of parked cars and peeling paint at the old gas station across the street. Behind the counter, a young waitress named Milani was watching him. Her fingers gripped the coffee pot a little tighter as she looked at it. Dark skin, military cap, slow but confident movements. She barely managed to hide the glimmer of disapproval in her eyes before she approached him. "How can I help you?" Her tone was sharp, impatient. Harold nodded politely. "Black coffee and breakfast on a special offer, if you have one." She didn't write anything down, but instead crossed her arms over her chest, shifting her weight on one leg. "We're all busy." Harold blinked, looking around. At the far end of the room, a couple was finishing their breakfast. The two booths were completely empty. There were a few empty seats at the counter. "It doesn't look like everything is busy," he remarked calmly. She exhaled sharply through her nose. "We are not serving now." His fingers tapped lightly on the table. He had seen it before, years ago, in places where he was not welcome. Then the signs spoke about it, now hidden behind fake smiles and far-fetched excuses. He met her gaze, steady and calm. "I served this country. I've earned the right to sit here and eat." Her expression hardened. "I don't make rules." There was silence in the diner. Several people turned around, their conversations fading just enough to catch the tension in the air. The elderly man at the counter frowned, but didn't say anything. Harold spent his whole life choosing which battles to fight. But he was too old to let the likes of this girl push him aside. He leaned back slightly. "I'll wait." But Melanie's patience ran out. She turned on her heel and headed for the phone at the cash register. Without hesitation, she picked up the phone and dialed the number. "Yes, I need an officer at Miller's Diner." Her voice was harsh. "Here the man creates a mess. Refuses to leave." Harold didn't move. He just watched her, feeling the weight of history on him again. But something told him that this time it would be different. Harold exhaled slowly. His fingers gripped the handle of the coffee cup. It was empty, and it had not touched his lips in any way. He wasn't surprised. He had seen this before. Wrapped in other words, hidden behind far-fetched rules. It's been decades since he was first told he wasn't needed here. But this pain never really went away. Milani was standing at the counter with her back to him. "The phone is pressed to your ear." "Yes, he's still here." Her voice was firm but quiet. "He makes me feel uncomfortable. He refuses to leave." Harold looked down at his hands, wrinkled from time and work. These hands once held a rifle under the scorching desert sun. They bandaged wounded soldiers in the dead of night. They built a life after the war, even when the country he fought for didn't always fight for him. And now those same hands were considered a threat, even though he didn't even move. He shifted a little on the spot, catching the eye of a woman at the far end of the hall. She quickly looked away, concentrating on her half-eaten plate of scrambled eggs. Across the room, a man in a trucker's cap nudged a friend, whispering something. Others just continued to eat, not wanting to interfere. Milane hung up and turned around. Her eyes slid over Harold as if he was already a solved problem. "They're on their way," she said, grinning a little. "You'd better leave before they get here." Harold didn't move. "I fought for this country," he said. His voice was calm but firm. "The one you live in?" She snorted. "That doesn't mean you can do whatever you want." The words hung in the air, heavy and familiar. He had heard them before, on battlefields, in government offices, in quiet conversations, when people thought he couldn't hear them. The diner became very quiet. Even the sizzle of the grill behind the counter seemed far away. A deep voice broke the silence. "Are you sure about that, miss?" It belonged to the elderly man at the counter, the one who was silently drinking coffee, while all this was happening. He put down his mug, and turned slightly in his chair. His face was lined, but there was something in his eyes that Melanie clearly hadn't expected: condemnation. Her jaw tightened. "It's none of your business." The man raised an eyebrow. "It seems you made it everyone's business when you called the police on a man who just wanted to eat his breakfast." There was a flicker of doubt on her face, but it disappeared immediately. She crossed her arms over her chest. "If you don't like it, you can leave too." The elderly man laughed dryly, shaking his head. "Honey, I've been coming here longer than you've been alive. I'm sure I have more rights here than you do." For the first time, Mylène looked unsure. But before she could say anything, the shrill wail of sirens cut through the air. The sound rolled through the diner, forks clattered on plates, the whispers intensified. Harold didn't turn around to look. He just sat and waited, while the red and blue lights flashed in the window. But the moment the officers went inside, everything changed. The door of the diner swung open with force, and the little bell above it tinkled loudly. The two officers stepped inside, their heavy boots clattering on the checkered floor. Their hands froze at their belts, their eyes scanned the room, looking for what was described as a mess. Harold remained seated, his posture unchanged. He's been in situations much more dangerous than this. He knew better than to move too fast, not to make sudden gestures. Mylène straightened up, a practiced innocence in her voice. "Officers. It's him." She pointed with a lacquered fingernail, sharply pointing it in Harold's direction. "He refused to leave when I asked him to. He makes people feel uncomfortable." One of the officers, a tall man with a square jaw, took a step forward. His stance was tense. His partner, a little younger, followed a step behind. But as they got closer, something changed. The senior officer's face changed. His jaw relaxed, his eyes widened, and his brows furrowed, as if he had seen a ghost. He froze in mid-step. "Sergeant Daniels." His voice sounded low, but weighty. Harold finally looked up. His deep-set eyes met the officer's face. There was a long pause, the moment stretched out, making time slow and thick. Then recognition flashed across Harold's expression. "Officer Caldwell." Harold said calmly, "I didn't expect to see you here." Melanie's confidence cracked. Her mouth opened slightly, confusion showing on her face. "Wait. Do you know him?" she asked. Caldwell ignored her. His hands were already far from his waist, his posture relaxed. He turned to his partner, shaking his head slightly. "Set aside." The young officer, clearly confused, hesitated, but then took a step back. Caldwell exhaled. "Sergeant Daniels saved my life in Fallujah. Pulled me out when my Humvee FEMA." The Humvee was blown up on a pile. His voice no longer had the authority with which he had entered. Now it was personal. There was a deathly silence in the diner. Mylène took a step back. It can't be true," she muttered. "Him. He behaved aggressively." Caldwell's eyes narrowed sharply, and his voice became cold. "Is this person aggressive?" He gave a short, dry laugh. "Are you sure about that, miss?" She cringed, looking around as if for support, but the audience was already against her. The elderly man at the counter leaned back with his arms crossed over his chest. "Yeah, baby, looks like you just got caught in a lie." A blush spread over Mylène's neck, her fingers trembled. Caldwell turned to Harold. "Sir, I am." He swallowed. "I'm sorry about what happened." Harold looked at him for a long time. "It's not your fault," he said simply. But the damage had already been done, and everyone understood it. Melanie's breathing changed, became rapid, shallow, as if she was trying to comprehend what had happened. The diner froze. Every eye was riveted on her. The accusations she had thrown out so easily now hung in the air like smoke that didn't dissipate. Caldwell stepped closer to Harold. His voice became quieter. "Sir, I should have come to you earlier. I didn't know you were back in town." Harold nodded slowly. "Didn't expect a meeting." A few people chuckled softly. Even Caldwell exhaled briefly. Something like laughter, if not for the weight of the moment pressing down on all of them. But Melanie wasn't laughing. Her face was pale, and her fingers were fiddling with the edge of her apron. "Me. I didn't know," she said almost in a whisper. Harold finally paid attention to her. "I didn't know what?" His voice wasn't angry. He was worse. Calm, expectant, as if he wanted to hear if she would be honest, if she would admit her mistake. She hesitated. "You didn't know who I was," Harold clarified in Chechnya. Mylène swallowed. "Or didn't you care?" Silence. Caldwell took a slow breath and turned to the manager. A burly man with a white apron pulled tight around his waist. He silently watched what was happening. His face remained impenetrable. "That's it. Is that how everything works here?" Caldwell asked. His voice was not loud, but there was such power in it that the manager could not remain indifferent. The manager glanced at Milan. Her eyes were wide, pleading. But there was no way out. He shook his head. "Milan, take off your apron." Her mouth fell open. "Wait, what? Did you hear me?" His voice was firm now. "We don't do that." She laughed nervously, but no one supported her. "I was just doing what I thought was right." The elderly man at the counter snorted. "No, girl. You did what you thought you could get away with." Her chest heaved, her hands clenched into fists. "It's not fair," she shouted. "I didn't mean anything bad." Harold tilted his head slightly. "You called the police on me." Melanie's lips trembled, but she didn't answer. The manager exhaled and pointed to the back door. "You're fired. Take your things and leave." For a moment, it looked like she was going to object, but then her shoulders slumped. She pulled off her apron, threw it on the counter, and left without a word. The door closed behind her and she disappeared. But her absence didn't erase what had happened. Rather, it made it even more obvious. The silence in the diner did not dissipate immediately. It hung in the air, heavy, dense, as if they were still trying to comprehend what they had seen. Then someone pushed back a chair. The elderly man at the counter leaned forward, shaking his head. "Damn it. Shame," he muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. "A person serves his country, returns home, and here is such gratitude to him." A murmur of agreement ran through the hall. The woman in the corner, the one who had looked away earlier, finally spoke. "Me. I should have said something earlier," she admitted hesitantly. "I've seen what she's doing, and it's simple." She paused. Guilt flashed in her eyes. Harold looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Did you see?" It wasn't a question. The woman swallowed. "Yes." He was silent for a long moment, and then, nodding slowly, simply replied, "Now you know." Caldwell exhaled, rubbing the back of his head. "I'm disgusted that this happened at all," he muttered. Then, turning to Harold, he asked, "Are you all right, sir?" Harold looked at him with a look that said he had been through much worse. "Yes," he said, "but it's not about me." The weight of these words fell on the whole hall, because it really wasn't just about Harold. It was about how easy it was for Milan to call the police, about how natural it was for some to just turn away, about how long it took for someone to finally talk. The manager, who had been silent since Milani's dismissal, cleared his throat. "Sir, I'd like to pay for your lunch," he said, on the house. And I want to personally apologize." Harold studied him for a moment, then shook his head. "I didn't come here for free food." The manager's face darkened slightly. Harold reached for his cane, and slowly and with dignity got up, took out a $20 bill from his wallet, and put it on the table. "Just make sure it doesn't happen again," he said. The manager nodded. His face reflected something like shame. Harold turned to look at Caldwell. "Take care of yourself, son." Caldwell straightened up, nodding firmly. "You too, sir." Then Harold headed for the door. His steps were confident. The cafe was quiet again, but not as quiet as before. It was not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of awareness. And now Melaine wasn't the only one who had to live with it. The bell above the door rang for the last time as Harold left. The late morning sun rose higher, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. He paused for a moment, gripping his cane tighter, and then moved on. Behind him in the cafe, no one moved immediately. The weight of what had happened was still hanging in the air. Caldwell exhaled, running his hand over his face. "I don't like it," he muttered again, his voice thick with annoyance. The older man at the counter leaned back. "Which part? The one where he wasn't respected, or the one where he handled it better than any of us?" Caldwell exhaled briefly, almost grinning, but not quite. "Both." The manager looked at the $20 bill still lying on the table. Something about her made his chest tighten. "I should have intervened earlier, did you admit it?" he confessed. The woman at the window shifted uneasily, shame flashed in her eyes. "We all had to." Outside, Harold walked slowly, his cane tapping on the sidewalk. A few people in the parking lot were still watching. Some were whispering among themselves, but Harold didn't notice them. He didn't have to prove anything. A few steps away from him, Melaine was sitting on the curb, hugging her knees with her hands. Her eyes were red, and her breathing was erratic. She wasn't crying, not really, but the shock hadn't gone away yet. She looked up as Harold passed by. Their eyes met. She almost spoke, almost said something. An excuse, an apology, though. But Harold didn't stop, didn't slow down. He just looked at her for a long time, calmly, not angrily, not triumphantly, but simply knowing. Then he walked past, crossing the street, heading where he needed to go next. And Melanie was left there alone, with the weight of her own actions, because some lessons come not with words, but with silence. The world continued to move. The traffic light on the corner changed from red to green, a car engine started somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. But inside that cafe, and in Melani's head, time did not flow so fast. She stayed on the curb long after Harold disappeared around the corner. Her fingers nervously tugged at the fabric of her clothes, her chest tightened. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she was angry at the consequences or at herself. Inside, the diners returned to their meals, but the atmosphere changed. The elderly man at the counter was drinking coffee thoughtfully. The woman at the window looked worried. The manager sighed and removed the 20 from the table, lingering on it for a moment before putting it in the cash register. Caldwell, standing at the door, watched this, then shook his head and muttered, "Damn shame." Then he left. Melaine finally got up from the curb, her legs shaking. All morning, she thought that she was in control of the situation, that she could do as she wanted, without consequences. But now she wasn't so sure. And here's the thing. The truth doesn't disappear just because you don't like it. Respect is not only for those we recognize, but also for those we don't know. For those who have been through battles that we will never know about. For those who have earned not just a place at the table, but the right to be seen as a person. Harold didn't ask for a confession. He didn't demand an apology. He didn't have to prove anything. Because real power doesn't require approval, it just exists. And the real lesson wasn't for Harold. He was for everyone else in that cafe. Maybe even for us. If this story made you think, if it stirred something in you, share it. Such stories are not just about one person or one moment. They're about all of us. Because silence is not always the answer. Sometimes it's important to speak up before it's too late. Let's get better.